the anxiety I was able to kind of get a hold on a little quicker. The depression was something that no matter what I did, I couldn't fight it. Hey, how you doing?
All right. How are you?
Another day in paradise. You know how it is, man.
Listen, so there's so much we could talk about. And I was told I'm getting the hook in half an hour. So I don't want to like fuck this up and be in the middle of something. So I'm kind of forced to just jump in. I have listened to your new record multiple times, and obviously that'd be the obvious place to start.
Okay.
Because with 4 books and many, many albums and many, many projects, I could, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And Larry King and interviews dating back to the 90s and all of it on YouTube and all is swirling in my brain.
Right.
Okay. So contrast is very important to you at this stage in your career.
Right.
You talked about this before, and you've talked about this recently, where the heavy stuff can only really be heavy if there's something to counterbalance it, and vice versa.
Right. Exactly.
That is very apparent on the new record, which kind of starts out on very somewhat familiar turf, and then all of a sudden, right?
Right.
Can you wax poetic on that if that's not too open ended, and I can ask you a more specific question?
No, man, I love it. To me, listen, I suffer from a compulsion to write music. I mean, I always have. I've since I was 12 years old, I have my whole journey has been to write the next song, the perfect lyric. That's been the only thing I've really ever wanted to do. Performing is secondary. Everything else is secondary to that. Like, I just love writing songs. I love starting with a nugget and having it become something that what started as something in my head and watch it blossom into something that turns into either a collaborative effort or something that I alone play. I mean, it's, to me, that's the whole point of doing this. Is the only limits are your imagination. So when it comes to the juxtaposition between all of the styles that I love to lean into, I never limit myself, like, to me, it's, all of these songs make sense when you listen to them as a journey, and every song as a fan of mine makes sense because you've heard elements of these things before. So it's like, when I did the first CMF2 album, I realized that by just kind of throwing everything at it, I was actually limiting what my capacity to make an album was, even though I was just stoked to be doing it. And maybe it was because it was the pandemic and everything was just kind of the Wild West at the fucking time, I didn't have any real expectations. When the album was embraced as it was, and I realized that I could really, kind of take it even further, that's where this album's really organic diversity came from, man. So when it comes to songwriting, I have 100% no fear. I don't give a shit what anybody says. I don't give a shit what anybody thinks. From day one, I've said, if I don't like it, you're not going to hear it. So everything I put out, I've already registered in my heart. And that is the end of discussion as far as who gets to have a say in what I do or not. Do I wish and hope that people like it? Of course. But it has to start with me, because if it doesn't start with me, then I'm putting out some bullshit that I can't even back,
Right. It's not going to be convincing.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm still here, is because the honesty has always been there. the tenacity has always been there. The fact that I will go into a studio and record whatever the fuck I want, I think is refreshing to people, because the landscape is littered with people who are subjected to, fucking opinion groups and, data and, ooh, how's this tracking? What do we think about this? I mean, fuck you. You're making music. You're not making fucking hamburgers. You're making music. And if it doesn't come from your heart, I don't want to fucking hear about it. So, and I've been lambasted in the past for having that sort of opinion, but I don't care.
Lambasted by who? From within?
Honestly, from a lot of fans of bands who suffer from that. A lot of critics who think I'm just putting on airs to get attention. A lot of my peers who don't want to fucking hear about it. They want to duck their head and just kind of do whatever. But it's like, fuck you, man. I've been doing this since I was 12 years old. And if I'm not continuing to do this for the same reasons that I had when I first started, then I'm not going to fucking do this, So to me, it just makes sense to go in and make an album that takes you on a journey and doesn't feel like the first floor of a fucking apartment building, just the same rooms, the same level, the same fucking furnishings, and the same fucking bullshit. I'm going to take you on a ride, whether you like it or not.
Well, it's and not only the first floor of an apartment building, but the apartment building we've been to before already. So what you said there, what I hear now, because although you're saying, you're talking about how you didn't care, you've never cared what people say, you have though, threaded certain styles together in certain projects, like kind of put certain things under certain roofs before, right? Like, this is the Stone Sour, this is my more folk country stuff, acoustic based stuff, you've kind of siloed them. Now that seems to be blown to shit. Like now it's just like, and so what I'm hearing is, hey, wait a minute, this is showing me as a songwriter that I can write in different guises, and the songwriting is going to be what is the common thread.
Right.
Oh,
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, and honestly, one of the reasons why I was very adamant about starting my solo thing is because there was a very weird misconception of who was writing what for what band, and maybe this is where my ego comes into play. I felt like I wasn't getting the credit for the things that I was actually writing, like with Stone Sour, it was fairly obvious, but there were a lot of songs that I wrote for Stone Sour that people thought Jim wrote, Josh wrote, or whatever, where that wasn't the case at all, And then with Slipknot, there was a lot of stuff that either wouldn't have been written without me, or that I wrote that other people gave credit to, And as someone who takes great pride in the fact that I can sit down and create something from nothing, just from my imagination, that stuck in my craw, Like I've never shied away from giving credit to the people that deserve it. I've never taken credit for anything that I didn't do. And I've always been the first to shine the spotlight on anybody else. Now, I don't necessarily get that in return. So this to me is, setting the record straight and changing the narrative. You know what I'm saying? Showing people that, oh yeah, he does write heavy shit and country shit and acoustic shit and piano shit and rock shit and punk shit and hard. I mean, the gambit. I can write it all, and this is proof of that. So for me, the challenge is always to find the next level. You talk about through lines, you talk about familiar styles or similar styles or whatnot. But at the same time, even though it's similar, no two songs are alike. And that's what I've been very conscious of my whole career. It's like I never want to feel like I'm repeating myself or I'm writing the same song, because that's even more boring than just writing the same shit over and over and over. You know what I mean? So to me, it's the challenge is also like kind of looking back over my shoulder going, okay, am I heading in a direction where I've never been before, or is this a path that I've already cut for myself?
Well, and I also think that the thing that feels new here is the juxtaposition, like the it's one thing to just throw everything at the wall like you described. That's not what this is.
Right.
This is it's like the transitions on the record from song to song are also composed, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and I did that on purpose. I mean, arrangements, sequencing is just as important to me, like when it comes to sequencing an album, I want people to follow the road that I see, not the road that may have been put together by somebody else who didn't have anything to do with the music. You know what I'm saying? The fact that other bands let other people sequence their albums is fucking crazy to me. Like, I'm like, what are you doing? This is your, this is your journey. This is your story. Why are you letting somebody else fucking tell it for you? So to me, it's just another piece of trying to convey that art, trying to convey, that creativity. It's just like, there's so much more that goes into a song, that goes into an album, that goes into a career that people don't even realize. So to me, it's grabbing onto that and shaping it even past the songwriting spot. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. This is probably the first time I've gotten the sense, or maybe a reminder, oh, this guy really loves music. And I don't know how accurate that is.
Right.
But I feel like this is maybe the first time you're coming across as a lover of music in its totality instead of a performer.
Right.
Like you're talking about your compulsion to create, right?
Oh, right.
I don't know how accurate that is. That's just the sense I got. I was like, oh, this is like not as simple as going through your record collection, but something kind of like that.
I can definitely see where you're going. Absolutely. I mean, this is definitely the first time I've worn it on my sleeve as much. I mean, I've always been a proponent of listening to a wide array of music. I've always been a guy that goes, don't just listen to metal. Don't just listen to pop. Don't just listen to punk. Expand your horizons, because that's how your songwriting is going to expand. So I've said that since day one, because it's a reflection of my own tastes. But maybe this is the first time that reflection's actually kind of putting my money where my mouth is, really, in a weird way. But you're right. I mean, with Slipknot, obviously there is a certain umbrella and of a certain style, maybe with the exception of this last album, that kind of goes without saying. We've really kind of become a genre unto ourselves with Slipknot, which is rad. Most bands spend their whole careers hoping for something like that. With Stone Sour, there was a little more leg room, a little more wiggle room, but we only really kind of we played between the sticks, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
With this band, I've taken all gloves off. I've taken all filters off. I've said, fuck this. This is kind of my dream thing, where if I want to sit down and write a piano song that sounds like U2 meets Kings of Leon, I'm going to fucking do it. And I don't give a shit what anybody fucking says about it, So I love the fact that I've been given the levity to be able to take things that far and just see what happens, because I feel like there is a big part of my fan base who actually really, who not only enjoys my performing, but enjoys my songwriting. You know what I'm saying?
Enjoys your artistry.
Right.
Is more in a sort of a elemental sense. If you wanted to do a fucking Sinatra song in your style, they would go with you there because they want that. They want, you talked about the compulsion to write music. I was going to ask you, where does how early in life did you feel focused and this kind of work ethic? Because it seems like you have a compulsion just to create things. Right. It's not just songs. Well, how far back did you feel like you were in a groove with that?
Oh, that's a good question. It probably started when I was about 19. because that's when I kind of rededicated myself to music in a weird way. It was definitely when I started going out of my way to start another band instead of just being the guy that joined bands, you know? And that's when that was the first year that I felt really confident in my guitar playing, my prowess, being able to play technically. That was the year that we first put Stone Sour together, which would have been
92.
It was 92. It was right before my 20th birthday. I was actually homeless at the time, which was good times, you know? So, but it was cool because I was homeless, but the guys in the band actually chipped in and got me a hotel room to be able for us to kind of hang out. And, you know, that was like my first sense of a brotherhood, first sense of a community, and a first sense of, okay, I can bring something into this that these guys have never had before, you know, which is a clarity, a musical voice, and something to take this even further than we wanted to, you know? So I that was the first year where I really felt confident in my skills as a guitar player. Because when Stone Sour first started, not only was I playing guitar constantly, but I was also the lead guitarist. So I was not only main writer, but I was always the lead guitar player. And that's kind of been the through line for my whole career, is I would always fill in the weaknesses for whatever band I was in at the time. Like when I first started, I was almost always better than the drummer that I was in a band with. So whenever we would do demos, I would play all the drums, and because I was just better, you know. But then I had to make a choice. I was like, I wanted to sing. I don't want to do both. I don't want to be Phil Collins. I want to just sing. On Sour, I was 9 times out of 10 always better than the guitar player that we had in the band as a lead player. So I said, fuck it. I'm just going to be, you know, I'll just handle it. I'm writing all the music anyway. I might as well be, you know, the guy who's kind of leading the charge in that. And then we'll just get a good rhythm guitar player to kind of go with, you know? So that was, you know, the kind of, I'd say that was the genesis of my really diving headfirst down, you know, just jumping off the cliff and praying to God that this parachute goes off, you know, like, because from that moment on, it was the only thing I really cared about.
I was surprised in the intro to America 51. You talk about how the night that the 2016 presidential election was decided, you went to your computer and you deleted the original manuscript in progress.
Yeah. Yeah.
How often I mean, obviously that was because you were about to approach that from a different perspective, right? And this obviously reframed the whole premise of that book in a way that you couldn't go back. But I'm just curious, how common is that for you to just be like, nope, delete, you know, erase?
It's something that I've only really recently gotten very comfortable with, because for me, as someone who is, like I said, compelled to just to try new things, to create new stuff, that you have to be 100% happy with what you're doing. You know, there have been things in the past that I've created that, in retrospect, I wish I could go back and change whatnot. You know, obviously hindsight and all that. But it's also proven to me that you can go back, you know, before you even put anything else. It's like, listen, if you're not feeling it, don't rush it. You know, like there's no timeline. It's one of the reasons why I haven't put out a new book in a while, is because I haven't really found what I want to talk about yet. And I definitely want to make sure that when I do talk about it, I can kind of follow that, you know, those trails to the natural conclusions of where I want to go. So to me, it's like, there's no urgency, you know? So if I start something and I'm not into it, you know, I just wipe it out and start over. I'm like, I don't even care, you know? So it's, you know, it's something that you have to be very sure of yourself. You have to know where you want to go creatively. You can't be scared of a lack of content, a lack of being able to provide content. You can't be scared of holding yourself back until you really find those natural conclusions, but because of that, it's actually made me a lot more confident in the things that I actually do produce and write and put out for the world to really see. Because then I know it's like, well, now, even if I do look back and go, God, I wish I could have done that. It's like, you know what? I took it as far as I could go in the moment. And now it belongs to the world,
You trust your pre-editing, pre-screening instincts more now than you did. Okay. So I'm going to go back a little bit, and this does relate to the new record, but I'll need you to bear with me for a second. So, okay. So just so you know, I'm a lifelong metalhead, so this is going to sound like somebody, oh, that music is so angry, right? But like, so even compared to like super heavy shit like Napalm Death or Morbid Angel or whatever, the super heaviest grindcore shit you can find.
Right.
There is an extremity of rage to those first few Slipknot records, and certainly the live experience, that makes me wonder, for a band that's achieving that on stage and getting that level of adrenaline,
right?
How did you cope with adjusting, walking off stage, and regulating that?
I mean, it's a good question, man. It's one of the reasons why I really struggled with addictions early on. Because I've been a person of addiction my whole life, for whatever reason. And when we first hit, having to kind of walk into that level of rage every night, because I mean, fuck, we toured like a band that had never toured before, let's put it that way. And we did it for probably a solid 4 years straight before we actually pulled ourselves off the road and said, we need to fucking figure this out. It's one of those things where you have to mature enough to be able to realize you have to rein it in. You know what I mean? And before that, we were just, at the time, we were just blown away that we were actually getting to do this. So I don't think we really, thought about the repercussions. We didn't think about how the darkness can compound and really, accumulate and get to the point where it will start to pull you down if you don't find a positive pressure valve to tap to be able to let that go, and nobody walked us through it. Obviously at the time, there were forces who were just kind of taking advantage of the fact that we were this force of nature that could make money for them. So nobody was really that worried about our state of mind, our state of being, our mental health, basically. It wasn't until we signed with the management company that would eventually become 5B, who has been our management company for 20 years now. It wasn't until then that we really had anyone looking out for us. And that was right around the time that we started to kind of put our pieces together and building a foundation over this abyss that we were constantly hanging over. It was dark, dude. There were some nights where I couldn't get off the hotel room floor because I was just so either chemically fucked up or mentally just gone, because I didn't want to go there. There was a reason that we had put it on album, is so I didn't have to deal with it again. And here I am every night having to walk through it. So the piece that I've had to make with that is the fact that I let it off the chain and then I rein it in. I've built my life around something other than that anger. I've decided to be a person who lives his life, not somebody who survived it. And that's where the difference comes in. It's like you can sit and wallow in the pain of your traumas and your abuse and your addictions and the substances and all of that. You can either do that, or you can be proactive and fight as hard as you can. Now, I know that there are certain people who fight as hard as they can and they don't win sometimes. But the point is that they fight. They don't let that backstory become the only definition of who they are. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Well, so for the new record, what I was going to ask you was, what are the things that get you lit up? Now, I mean, it's on there. If we listen to what you're saying, we can hear it, but I don't want to speak for you. It's like it's a wiser kind of agitation.
You're not wrong. Yeah, no, absolutely. For me, it's not as much. In the beginning, it was almost like scream therapy. It was like I was trying to be poetic, but at the same time, it wasn't it wasn't so important what I was saying as how I was saying it. Now it's so much more important of what I'm saying, because to me, that is a fulfillment of a promise I made to myself a long time ago, and that's where I started. And that's kind of where I've come back around to, is wanting to write and be artistic, poetic, emotional, and prolific. Those are my 4 goals. So I dip my toes into these things that I've dealt with my whole life, but because I'm trying to shoot it from a standpoint of, like I said before, never wanting to repeat myself, but always trying to say the perfect thing or find the perfect way to express myself. It's taken on more of an urgency, especially in the last few years. So on this album, I'm talking about everything from my previous divorce to my previous, dealings with abuse. There's songs about my wife now, who is, to me, is probably my greatest muse that I've ever had. I'm talking about the friends that I've had over the years who so they're not really friends to begin with. There's a litany of things that I'm talking about. Depression is something that I've really tried to strive to communicate to people, because the more they can understand how depression affects me, maybe it'll help them figure out how it affects them and be able to maneuver these things a little easier, especially physical depression, which is something that it's so hard to describe to people. And yet it's something that is almost as debilitating as any type of addiction that I've ever experienced.
I'm going to leave you with this, and I'll smush into one question before they get the hook out. Okay, so Iowa it just hit me this morning, kind of like the straight out of Compton of that part of the country, in that it opens a door into a realm that nobody knew about. I mean, it also puts it on the map in a way, right? But it also it's like, man, there's all this underbelly to life that we don't know. You traveled a lot as a kid, and you wrote a book on America. What have you learned about America from traveling around, both within the country and outside of it? I know you have a lot to say on this. This will be 2 minutes, but how's your perspective changed? Yeah.
Growing up on the road, whether moving around or touring or whatever, I've seen that, the country has changed a lot over the years. People have changed a lot. The things that used to define certain parts of the country have changed a lot, The thing that I've noticed now is that because of the internet, because of technology, the world is smaller. And because of that, people are trying to make things more exaggerated or important than they actually are. It's, there's that there's that really awful problem that we have right now of conspirituality, which is everyone, wants to be special. So they dive down every conspiracy theory wormhole that they can to feel like they're in the know. They know what's going on. They're onto something that not a lot of people know about. It's your QAnons, it's your, celebrities eating babies bullshit. It's all of that psycho shit that is tying a lot of the country together, which is a fucking issue. The fact that people are actually even giving oxygen to any of this shit, and it's becoming even more prevalent, even more mainstream, even more accepted amongst people who purportedly used to be fucking, very smart, is scary. The fact that people like Robert Kennedy Jr. he's being taken seriously is a real issue. So that's the thing that I've discovered, is that crazy is running rampant, and not just in certain parts of the country where I know a lot of elitists want to think that it's only sequestered to little pockets here and there. No, it's fucking everywhere. And now it makes me put my head on a swivel to worry about where the fuck the crazy's coming from, because now I have no clue, man. And that's scary.
Well, it's got to be what you're describing has to be coming from people as well, and musicians.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
One of the things that struck me is you and Sean Sean still lives in Des Moines, or at least there's you still have roots there, right?
Yes.
Despite all of these mixed or these feelings about this place where you grew up. Can you talk about that?
I think there's always going to be a part of us that feels like we're from Iowa, no matter where we live. I've lived in Vegas now for the last 15 years. And for the longest time, I had a house in Iowa and a house here. And then I only just in the last couple of years has sold the house in Iowa because, obviously Griffin was older, he's moved out. There was really no reason for me to keep a house there. He had moved out. My grandmother had passed away. Mm-hmm. So my roots there were very limited. So now I go and visit friends and whatnot, but I don't maintain a house there. That being said, I still consider myself a guy from Iowa, a guy who grew up in Iowa, even though I moved around a lot. I never felt connected to anywhere more than I did Des Moines, Iowa, because it was the place where I found all the people like me. It was the place where I creatively grew up. And I moved around a lot when I was in my 20s, trying to find a better place to start my craft, to start my musical career, man. I lived in Denver. I tried doing it in Kansas City. I tried doing it in, Omaha. We went all over the place trying to make it. And everywhere we went, nowhere was as creative, nowhere was as driven, and nowhere was as crazy as Des Moines, fucking Iowa. And that's straight up the truth. Everywhere I went felt two-dimensional. Everywhere I went felt like it wasn't, there was no passion, man. There was nothing that compared to the psychoses that drove everybody from Des Moines, And in a lot of ways, I think it scared a lot of people, that just how fucking crazy and driven we were. But at the same time, what also scared them was the fact that they couldn't keep up with us, And that's one of the reasons why Slipknot is what it is because we still have that fiery heart from Iowa, even though, it's not the original 9 anymore. the spirit is still there. And, you know, that's the connection that I still have to Iowa. And that's still the connection that I have for a lot of the people who, you know, I keep in touch with there.
So you're saying that wasn't unique to Slipknot, because Slipknot initially in those first few years seemed like a band that your lives depended on going into that inferno, you know, emotion, like your lives depend, like it's like this shit we have to do this.
That's kind of what tied us together, you know? I mean, and I think that's one of the reasons why Slipknot made it and some other bands didn't. But what I'm talking about is more to the point, the fan base, the fans who helped really amplify Slipknot, you know, the people like us who were obsessed with music, were obsessed with art, were obsessed with expression. We were pent up, we were compartmentalized and held back in a lot of ways. And we just came screaming out of the Midwest, you know, and a lot of the reason why we were propelled there is because of the people who were behind us. You know, our fans were just as fucking crazy as we were. And when we hit, they felt like they won as well, you know? So it was definitely something that where we represented the passion and the insanity of Des Moines, you know? And the people who really started out listening to us, they never changed. And they've been with us like the whole time.
See, what you're talking about with the sentiments in the country and everything and all that division, I'm surprised to hear you don't relate more to how people in quote unquote flyover country have feelings of resentment about being viewed that way. I
mean, we did, you know, I mean, but at the same time, it's like everybody would come through Des Moines, and this is a true story. All the bands who I'm friends with now, they would always say they would come through Des Moines and it would always be the craziest fucking show that they had ever been at, you know? And that was because of the underground. You know, everybody talks about, when you talk about flyover states, everybody talks about the mainstream idea, the picture, you know, the American Gothic fucking bullshit that, you know, everybody in Iowa has a farm, a cow, and a sister they fuck. You know, that was the joke for the longest time, you know, or that South Park episode where it was like, you know, 5 years behind, you know, it's like, ooh, let's go see the man frozen in time from Des Moines, Iowa. You know, we took exception to that, but we also knew that not one of those fucking people could hold a candle to us when it came to taking music to the extreme, taking entertainment to the extreme, taking life to the extreme, you know? And we were okay with that. You know, we grew up in this culture where, you know, everybody looked at Iowa as this raging Republican fucking state. And yet the underbelly, especially in the bigger cities, was very, I'm not going to say liberal, but it was definitely very more like progressive, you know, like all of us were against the conservative Christian bullshit, you know, and that hasn't changed. You know, we may have Midwestern values, but our idea of what is right and wrong is clearly in difference to the controlling state government that's going on in Iowa right now. There's way more liberal than people think in it. Because, I mean, Iowa is nominally a purple state for the most part. It all kind of depends on which way the country's kind of shifting. You know, if you look at the Clinton years, the Bush years, the Obama years, and the Trump years, it was very much like lock and step with the popular vote, which way it was going to go. So it's always been overlooked as a pulse check for the state of the country, you know, politically, socially. And we were always kind of at the heart of that, you know? So I don't know. We never really worried about being a punchline because we knew that the people who were saying that it's such two-dimensional fucking thinking that we didn't even get it in any air, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I was just wondering, you know, about that gives me a lot more context, like understanding of where you're coming from and what the perspective of America 51 and everything you're talking about.
Right.
A young person today, when you try to imagine what it's like to be young today, what do you think you would be angry or angsty or upset about? I don't mean to minimize it, but like, what would upset you?
Oh Christ! These days, obviously, the politics of the day. So I've always been kind of more in the middle than anything else, to be honest. The rampant conservatism bothers me, because it's feeling very much like the 80s right now, and it's I'm sure, I don't know if you remember how bad it was.
I do.
It was, this is actually making the 80s feel like the 40s, for fuck's sake. I mean, it's really bad, because not only is it one extreme or another, I find myself at odds with both sides of what's happening. There's a reason why the conservatives call the liberals pedophiles, is because they got tired of being called Nazis by the liberals, so they sat down and they said, okay, well, what's just as bad as being called a Nazi? Oh, okay. It's, once you kind of figure out what each side is trying to do, you can see through the shit like used Neutrogena. You just like, this is such fucking pathetic bullshit. And yet here we are in the middle with all of these people who are voting against their best interests for the better part of 40 fucking years now, and wondering why nothing's gotten better. Every time their team wins, nothing gets better for them. And they haven't sat down to figure out why. It's because it's not about the system. It's about the narrative. It's scare tactic. And it always happens, no matter what side is on whatever. So that's what I would be pissed off about, is the fact that this is the very definition of insanity, and nothing's going to change until somebody breaks that narrative. And I don't think anybody's ever going to, because people are very comfortable with it.
Yeah, it's like those two teams you're talking about. They amplify, they define, they even create each other. I think they depend on each other to exist, right? It's like this enemy that I'm projecting all these things onto, that I'm actually doing the exact same things, but in a slightly different way. Right. I need that for my sense of self to hold together. And there's like millions of people doing that now. And they kind of egg each other on and ratchet up the intensity level until it's like standing between two amps, like feeding back nonstop. You're like, holy shit, like I can't hear myself through all this. So that's, certainly I would imagine that a young person has a sense of being caught in the gears of that.
Here's something.
Okay, please.
A lot of people aren't talking about is the fact that, everybody demonizes capitalism, which I don't think that's the real problem, because I don't have a problem with capitalism. The problem is that they are mistaking capitalism for exponential growth. With all of these companies, these corporations, these organizations are only happy when they can look at their ledger and show constant growth. It's a fucking Ponzi scheme, for Christ's sakes, which is one of the reasons why they're shrinking the pay for their workforce, but hiring more people at almost at a sweatshop level, so they can actually show that they're turning a profit for their fucking shit. Whereas before this rampant shit, even back in the 50s, consistency was the key. If you could show a consistent in the black, you were a successful corporation. It wasn't until the hyper capitalism came into play of, I want to say it was the late 70s, early 80s, is when it really took off. And now that's the blueprint. If you can't show growth for every year, you get fucked. And that's one of the reasons why people are striking, whether it's the teachers unions or we're seeing it right now in Hollywood, It's the fact that people are tired of being marginalized for pennies. Also these fucking people can fucking exist. It's the whole problem that I've had with DSPs for the longest time is because they don't, they're not designed to last like that. They only make sense if they can show a profit over the whatever, but they don't spread the profit to the people who actually put the fucking work in the first place. So that's some shit that I'm fucking pissed off about as well.
Yeah, there's an inhumanity to this. The fact that the Lyft and DoorDash and Uber and all that stuff, it's like there's no human interface to that. If you have an issue, you're talking to a fucking bot, right?
Exactly.
Like there's no benefits, obviously, things like that. It's just like, man, we're all being steered. I saw a conservative speaker who said, let's not confuse capitalism with monopolism.
And that's exactly. And the fact that it was a conservative saying it, for the large part, they don't like anyone telling them that they can't fucking make money, So that tells you how fucking bad it is when that's actually saying we need to rein this in a little bit. Unchecked growth is not growth. It is a virus.
It's kind of like,
remember that.
Yeah, it's kind of like a path to inevitable, and I don't want to overuse this term. It's inevitable slavery in a way because they don't like the thing with conservatives of the past is like they didn't want anybody to interfere with their selling that idea to you, the small business person, even though it's you're fucking yourself by signing up for that, by signing up for the steamroller that's going to crush you, right? But they like the illusion of, oh no, this is we're for the business person. So yes, that tells you how far it's gone.
That's what chasing that feeling is. Chasing that feeling, needing to feel that growth. Let's not forget what that is. That you're chasing that feeling that you got the first time. What does that describe to you?
Addiction.
Exactly. And that's what it is. You're addicted to growth. You're addicted to the cash. You have no idea the fucking aftermath and the damage that is in your wake of the people who you are fucking ruining with that.
Right. Because there's a really, I heard an economist who does a lot of YouTubes about conscientious. What he said was people who amass wealth are actually psychopathic because they take money out of circulation that no one else can touch. And they're just feeding this. So now as someone who's made money, how did you experience that? When there's all these bags of money on the table, because I hear when we talk about sports salaries, it's like, oh my God, when is enough money for these people? Right. How tempting was that for you to get caught up in that?
I mean, honestly, in a weird way, we don't make a lot of money, which is, we make enough to live, obviously, and we can live comfortably, but we've never been offered massive deals. There's a lot of us in the band and there's a whole crew that we have to pay. There's the production that we have to pay for. There's all of this shit that we need to pay for. So at the end of the day, we are paid pretty much commiserate with what we are worth. We've never been even close to the big paydays that sports people get, the actors, all of that shit. So in a weird way, we're kind of, if you adjust for inflation, we're upper middle class, basically. We're not extravagant. We're not rich by any stretch of the means, but we do okay. I can take care of my family. Their educations are good to go. I have insurance for all of my kids. And really that's it, So we've never been, and maybe it's because we're so reactionary, maybe it's because we are not palatable for a mass audience. We appeal to our genre and people kind of on the outskirts of our genre. But that's it. We appeal to a lot of them, so we do okay. But we're never going to see fucking Taylor Swift money, shit like that. So, the misconception that, all rock stars are just rolling in it, that's not true. It's still, I have to, there's a reason why we have to tour as much as we do, because that's the only way we can actually pay our fucking bills.
Yeah. So it doesn't sound like you've ever had to make that, face that deal with the devil then.
No. I've definitely walked away from offers that didn't make sense. There's the old story about the Burger King thing that happened. They came to us before they created that chicken fries commercial and basically tried to rip our masks off. That's why we sued them, is because they came to us before asking if we would be the band in that commercial to sell this shit. And we're like, we're not trying to sell fucking fast food. What do you want? And when they came out and there were all those similarities to the masks, we were like, fuck you. But nobody wanted to talk about that at the time. Nobody wanted to talk about the fact that they tried to steal our likenesses to pitch that shit because we wouldn't sign up for it. It's a slippery slope, and maybe it's because we grew up in Iowa that we look at it and we go, we don't want anything that we didn't earn. We also don't want to do anything that we don't back. That's a very conservative way to look at it in a weird way. But at the same time, it's like, I'm not going to fucking do something that A, I don't support, or B, I'm not, enjoying, or I didn't create or whatever. That's one of the reasons why I've walked away from so many of these collaborations that I've been offered in the past. And I only really do the ones that I'm interested in. I've walked away from some that could have paid me in the 6-7 figures. And I'm okay with that because I don't want to put my face on something that I don't fucking support. Now, there's a lot of fans who will look at me and go, well, what about this? It's like, because I was into it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't give a shit if you don't fucking like it. I was into it. It was different. It was fun. It was cool. Whatever the reason was, I was into it and I wanted to fucking do it. People don't want to hear that shit. They think that I only did some, certain shit for the fucking money, where it's like, a lot of this shit I do for free.
So you're talking about Slipknot in the present tense now. Very recently, that wasn't so much the case. There was a quote that went viral. Where do things stand with that? And then I'll close on the new record. Where's your relationships with Sean and everyone else and that whole organization?
Right we're now? Good. We, Slipknot, we're always up and down with Slipknot, like we're brothers, but we're not always the best of friends. There's a push and pull that kind of comes with being in this band, and it's largely because we're all such different people, and when you have so many different personalities, you're not always going to be on the same page. Now, you're always going to be devoted to the band and to each other when it comes from that standpoint. But, there's a lot of times where if you're in disagreement with the people that you're working with or you're creating with, it's going to leak out once in a while, I haven't, said blatantly that I was going to leave or whatever. But what I have said is that physically, I just don't know how much longer I can do it, between my spinal surgery, my knee surgeries, just a litany of fucking health issues that I've had over the years. It's getting harder and harder to do it. And because when I get on stage and I throw myself into the performance and I come off stage and all of a sudden the adrenaline peels away and I'm left just beat to shit, it's getting harder for me to maintain that, you know? It could be 5 years, could be 10, but you know, there's definitely a shelf life for how hard I can go. And if that's the case, I don't want to be the guy walking around on stage, you know, or hobbling around on stage, trying to be the guy who he was 40 years before that. I just won't do it. And the guys know that. And we all kind of share that same feeling, you know. It's one of the reasons why we try to evolve, to create, you know, to push the boundaries of what we do, but it's almost always still in that same realm. You know, we can't help ourselves. We're, you know, so it's hard. You know, it's definitely something that we're looking at our own mortality now. And it, you know, we've had people from our family die, you know, they've
yes.
lost the war, and that's something that it can reconfigure the way you look at shit very quickly. So, you know, as far as where we are as a band, we're fucking awesome right now. Everybody's good. We just had one of our best shows at Incarceration a couple nights ago. And I just remember all of us looking at each other going, fuck, this was really good. You know, so it's been really, really good, lately. And we're actually really looking forward to the future, whatever that holds. But yeah, we're, you know, are we always going to get along? No. Are we always going to be dedicated to this? Yeah, we always will.
You talked a moment ago about depression, which is also addressed on the record. I mean, you've been open about attempts to take your own life,
right?
On multiple occasions, even fairly recentish into your adult life and into your career. You've talked about your sexual abuse experience, all these things. Is there anything on the record that we haven't touched on that you're disclosing that we haven't talked about just now that you would want to draw attention to? Because you've said that, you know, you wanted this to be more of an emotional, socio-emotional like focus rather than a political focus, because you've talked about that before. Where are you with these struggles that have been ever present in your life? And what else is on this record that you're sharing that I haven't touched on today?
I mean, that's pretty much it. You know, right now the demons are at bay. You know, right now I'm actually in a pretty decent place in my life and my heart. You know, I'm married to a wonderful woman who every day surprises me by just how her capacity for understanding, you know, because being married to me isn't easy. It's, you know, I'm a fucking asshole sometimes. You know, my kids are doing really, really well. I'm getting to spend a lot of time with them, which is something that I'd hoped to do in the past. But, you know, it's taken this long to really kind of get to the point where I can call my own schedule and write it and be like, no, I'm taking a month off. I'm going to be with my kids. I'm going to hang out. I'm going to do my thing. My bands are doing really well. I'm able to write a lot of music. I've got some more cool opportunities kind of coming down the pike. I'm in a really good place in my heart right now. Now, will that last forever? I don't know. You know, there are definitely times where I'm in a great spot and then my physical depression hits and then I just have to kind of ride it out. You know, there's no way to control it. Unless I go on meds, and to me, the risk of losing my creativity is far worse than having to deal with just riding out a physical lapse in depression, you know, which I've done. And luckily I'm surrounded by people who understand, because I've been able to explain to them that it's not triggered really by anything. It just happens. And once you understand that, that support can be there for you to help you ride it out, you know?
How have you stayed productive? You know, this is something I wondered when I was listening to the Fragile, I don't know what it was, like a ton, like 8 years ago.
Right.
It's like, man, like when, like just looking at the sheer ability to put something like that out, like working 15 hours a day for like 3 years or whatever he did,
right.
For that record. How do you do that for people that don't know what physical depression is
right.
like? Because we see people that are functioning, right? You go, wow, this person's functioning. They're getting it done.
Right.
How have you done that? How can you enlighten us on that?
I mean, a lot of it comes down to working while you're manic and while you're in a sense of levity. You know, there's a reason why I just have bursts of creativity and bursts of trying to get shit done, is because I know that if I get caught up and I get ahead of the curve, then when that feeling hits me, I don't have to worry about, you know, having to really rise to it. I can hit pause on shit like that and kind of, you know, wait for that blanket to kind of get lifted off of me and then kind of pick it back up. But it's just working ahead of time and making sure you almost have a surplus of things that are there for you to be able to provide and do whatever, you know. And that's why I try to work as quickly as possible. I try to get the answers out as quickly as possible. If people need things from me and there's even a huge window, I try to get it done immediately, because you just don't know what you're going to feel like in a month, you know. So I try to work ahead of time. I try to work the curve to my advantage. And then when it comes time for me to have to kind of give in to that physical depression, I can. And my support system understands that. So they, you know, kind of keep work at bay while I ride it out. And luckily for me, it only lasts about 4 or 5 days. And, you know, so I can kind of get back on my feet. So I'm able to kind of put things off for a minute or postpone them. Like I never cancel anything, but I postpone them to the point where, you know, once I kind of get back on my feet, I go, okay, let's go. We can do this now, you know? So it's never been a long period. You know, when I was fucked up, they were longer, but that's because the chemicals were, you know, perpetuating it. You know, being sober and being, you know, trying to be as healthy as possible, you know, and taking care of myself, those lapses have gotten smaller and smaller to the point where, you know, if I know it's coming, I let everybody know. I postpone things. I put it off until I know it's going to be that. And then I can allow myself to deal with it. And even if I'm on the road, I can kind of fight through it enough to get what I need to do done, i.e. like the shows and the press and whatnot, because I know that it's temporary. And knowing in your head that it's temporary definitely helps, man. You know, like, you know, there's an end in sight. So it's just being prepared, and allowing yourself to feel it instead of trying. Because if you try to repress it, it will come back twofold, threefold, and it will engulf you and it'll fuck your life up, man. You have to be brave enough to just be able to embrace it and know that it's just a part of who you are. And then you just go on.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the feeling you're describing from experience, but in terms of debilitating anxiety, I can go, okay. I can do a whole dissertation on that.
Right.
And that's exactly what it's like. You can put it off to a degree, but it's going to come back and bite you much harder.
Yeah. And almost exponentially. Like it's,
yes,
it will get a bear hug on you to the point where physical depression is very much like having an out-of-body experience. Your body, you have no energy. You can't really think. It's just a deadening of everything. It's a muted. The thing that I've always described it as is wandering around the earth wrapped in 6 wet blankets, trying to function. You know, everything feels heavy. Conversation feels heavy. Having to people feels heavy. Like you just can't, you can't muster the energy to do anything. There have been times where I've laid on the floor for hours because I just don't want to get up. Don't want to do anything. I don't want to feel anything. I can't be anything. I don't want to be me. That's what physical depression is in a nutshell. I mean, it's so much more than that, but that's the only real way to kind of introduce people into what it's like to feel that coming on. It's almost like you have 2 gigantic hands that are moving in towards you, and you know they're coming. And at some point they're going to wrap around you for a time, but there's nothing you can do about it. Nowhere you go, nowhere you move, nowhere. It's just, and it's going to hold you there for a second. And a second feels like, fuck, it feels like a day. Just everything. It's maddening in a weird way. Because you can't do anything about it. So
and your body feels foreign to you, and you're, you know, with anxiety, it's like your body and your mind are fighting you,
right?
Like in a cage match with yourself. And what you're describing sounds a lot like what Phil Anselmo described as black moods. That's his term for that. Right. So when you were, whenever this would hit, when you were on the road with Slipknot in the early days, I can't imagine your bandmates had the best understanding. Like, when did this,
right?
When did you feel like you could even describe or have a handle on what was happening to you?
Ooh, I think that honestly, I think the first time I was really even aware of it was when I first got sober back in 2003. It was late 2003 anyway, because I was experiencing, because my body was reacting physically to the fact that I wasn't loaded anymore. You know, this is probably after about 6 months that my body started feeling things again, which was crazy. You talk about anxiety. I had so many anxiety attacks because I wasn't used to being in public sober.
Sure.
I was used to having to socialize sober. And because I wasn't in the program, I didn't understand how to kind of make my way through that and relearn how to be whatever. So I was just doing it from the ground up, you know? And that's when I first discovered the physical depression that would hit me. I was like, oh, okay, this is new. What is this, you know? And I think because I drank a lot, it kind of glossed over the fact that I was experiencing that. And you gotta remember, I was a full-blown alcoholic for about 4 years straight. Like, I mean, and with every year, the drinking got exponentially worse to the point where in 2003, when we were making Volume 3, I was drinking at least 2 bottles of Jack Daniels a day. I mean, and that's not even including what I would then go to the bar and drink. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I was just in a constant state of whiskey. Like, it was bad. Like, and physically, I was horrible at the time. So once I kind of physically got through that, you know, because it takes about 6 months for you to get all of that shit out of your system, I realized that I was, you know, feeling things that I wasn't familiar with, you know. The anxiety I dealt with because I'm kind of a naturally social person anyway, when I want to be. So that the anxiety I was able to kind of get a hold on a little quicker. The depression was something that no matter what I did, I couldn't fight it, like I couldn't, and I tried Wellbutrin for a while. That really didn't do anything for me other than make me worse, really. And I just remember going, I need to kind of figure out how to just live with this, and that took trial and error. It took being with the right people, obviously, because a lot of people don't understand it and then don't want to understand it. So they'll just blame you for being selfish, which is horrible, and it's a hard thing to deal with, especially when, they kind of look at your life as just being all about you anyway, because of the fact that you're the breadwinner, you're the one who, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's an overreaction to an underlying problem that they have, not so much you, but they have, and it's tough it makes it worse for you, until you get with the right group of people who understand that it takes support, not, it takes support, not persecution to get through.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like once, to be cliche, but once those storm clouds, at least you get some sort of warnings. You seem to have like a precognitive, like awareness that
Right.
those clouds are rolling in. You can see them in the distance, and you can kind of find some kind of form of shelter or something to kind of ride it out.
It's interesting. Yeah. I've always been very physically in tune with what's going on with my body. And I think it's because I'm a singer and I have to naturally know how I am on the road constantly. Like if I'm getting sick, I instantly know. Like if I'm coming down with, I'm constantly trying to be in tune with how I am, so I can get ahead of it. So I can make sure that I don't have to cancel any shows. I can kind of get through it and blah, 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 blah. I think because of that, being in tune with my body as much as I am, I do read those signs faster. I become aware of it a little faster, and obviously it helps me get ahead of it. It doesn't make it better, but it allows my life to keep going instead of just absolute damper on everything.
Right. Or letting a tornado rip everything that rip the roof off everything. And what you're describing with the alcohol, I mean, in a sense, that is your intuitive awareness that you needed something,
right?
Even though it felt horrible and shitty and was destroying your body. I mean, that just that much alcohol will kill. It'll just pickle you. After a while, and shred your guts and just fuck you up.
Is as good as it is, to be honest. Like no fatty tissue, thankfully. But yeah, I mean, I was heading that way. Let's put it that way. I mean, it was really, really bad.
So, but I mean, I can see where you would reach to something like that to kind of stave off, to keep this other thing at bay, which some part of you is like, no, well, that's too much. Now you've moved out into the open,
right?
And allowed it to to pass through. I mean, I think there are people that even have trouble with standard emotional ups and downs.
Right.
Just one thing I always tell people is what I've learned is if something really, really, really good happens, or a really, really, really good feeling.
Yeah.
For me, I've learned that I have to ride that out in a very similar way, almost the same as if something really, really bad had happened. It destabilizes. It's like turbulence one way or the other.
Right.
And I can see why we all reach to things to medicate ourselves.
Right.
But when you learn to sit with it, even though it's fucking uncomfortable, eventually it starts to get easier. And that's what you're describing.
Yeah.
It
comes down to honestly, it comes down to So I can't even think of the word. But yeah, no, you're right.
If the word comes to you, please, by all means.
I will. Yeah.
I guess the last question, and thanks for going extra, man. I appreciate it, because I was like really anticipating having to cram all this stuff into a short window. But you're a parent. You've been a parent for a while. You know, Slipknot to me, it's like the definition of that primal cycle of like young people having to say fuck you to the world,
right?
Life, right? Just like fuck you, stick their daggers out. Now, as a parent, how do you relate to, like, you know, how did you guide your kids through that? Because that happens to, like, it has to, pretty much every kid, right? Everybody goes through that. What was your role in like observing that with your kids, or how guiding them through it? Like what role did you play?
That's a good question, man. You know, with Griff, I think it's because I never put any expectations on him. You know, I only ever tried to be supportive of him, like whatever he wanted to do. There was naturally a few years where we butted heads because he's a teenager. I'm a father. It's only recently that I've really started to learn how to communicate with my kids. You know, before it was very much the Iowa method, where it's fuck you, do what I'm saying, you know, do what I tell you, you know, instead of going, all right, you're saying this, but this is what I want. Let's talk, you know? And I mean, you'd have to ask Griff, obviously, the effects that my, you know, yelling at him as a kid have had on him. I'm sure I've instilled in him a certain amount of anxiety, which as a father, you hate to hear, you know? But at the same time, he also knew how supportive I was of whatever he wanted to do. You know what I'm saying? The only thing I ever asked of him was that he graduate from high school, because that was the one thing that I never did because of my behavior, you know? And to me, that is the start, is a building block of, you know, at least maintaining some semblance of stability in your life, you know? And watching him discover music that resonated with him, and then watching him want to kind of follow, not really follow in my footsteps, but create his own path, do music, realizing that there was going to be a shadow there, at least at first, was very gratifying, man. You know, and in a weird way, it actually brought us closer. I've never restricted my kids from listening to certain types of music, other than, you know, the some of the more suggestive and overtly graphic hip hop that's out there. You know, obviously that's not for my 8-year-old to fucking listen to. It wasn't for Griff to listen to or whatever. I don't have an issue with swear words. I have an issue with the pictures that they're painting, because that's really what it comes down to, is context. You know, if you say the word fuck as an expletive, that doesn't bother me. But if my 8-year-old is listening to, you know, somebody describe a very graphic sex scene in a fucking hip hop song, no, you know, we're not doing that. Like, it's so to me, you have to understand the difference, you know. That's kind of where I was as an artist, you know. And I think that's one of the reasons why we resonated, and we still resonate with people, is because it's not shock, it's expression. You know, there's a very big difference. You know, there are artists who we are kind of lumped in with who are very much just shock. They chase it. We talked about exponential, you know, sure, growth. There's also exponential shock, because what happens when you're out of shit to be shocking about? You know, like, it's you've now numbed your audience to the point where, you know, when you say something, they go, But when you come at it from a creative standpoint, of an emotional standpoint, of, you know, marrying emotion with art and creativity and passion. Now you're not just, you know, you're not shocking people. You're expressing yourself, and you're taking it in a direction where, you know, it may be shocking for some people because of the language, but for people who get it, they understand that you're just trying to say something. You're trying to encourage people to say the same thing. You're trying to encourage people to let go of that. And because of that, I've been able to really kind of look at the music that my kids listen to. And I can, you know, as a songwriter, obviously I can kind of see it and I can hear it and I can understand the different personalities that are behind those things. And it makes it easier for me to say yes or no. You know, like if there are people who are just blatantly going out of their way to be extreme and in shock, no, I'm not going to let my young kids listen to it. You know,
so what about like Cannibal Corpse or something like that?
Well, I mean, even Cannibal Corpse, man, it's like, it's thematic, you know, like, and obviously Griff as an adult can listen to whatever the fuck he wants, you know, but luckily my 8-year-old daughter isn't trying to listen to, you know, Corpse Grinder, you know, scream his guts out, you know, which is fine. I'll keep that for me. She can listen to, you know, the Taylor Swifts of the world and all this stuff. So it just comes about understanding what the songs are about, you know, even on a surface level, you know, it's me putting my money where my mouth is again, you know, understanding that it's about context, not the words. It's not the words, it's the context. And if I can understand that, then, you know, it makes it easier for my kids to be able to listen to whatever they want.
Well, and you're showing them discernment.
Exactly. Exactly it. Yeah.
They will have their own way of discerning, but they've seen the example of things sort of curated that you can be intentional about what you listen to in relating to it rather than just take whatever. Also,
this is very important. It allows them to develop their own taste and not just emulate my taste
or anybody's
or anybody.
Feel like they have to emulate or keep up with any other social group or have that define what it is they listen to. As a parent, the thing that I would be the most delighted about is, number one, I don't care, and this is actually about anybody, but I don't care. You definitely don't have to like the same music as me. You don't have to like music. What I want to see in someone that I want to relate to is that you love what you love with a real investment, and then I'm going to be on board with whatever that is. And also as a parent, I so look forward to the day. I pray for the day when my daughter says, "Oh, I made this thing. What do you think?"
Right.
And then I give my feedback and she goes, "Well, actually, I like it the way I did it. You kind of don't know what the fuck you're talking about." When your kid can stand in that, I made this and you're just dumb if you don't get it.
Right.
That's what I'm looking forward to. Not, "Daddy, do you like it?" Like, "Oh, Daddy, I made this and I like it."
Right. Exactly.
You've talked a lot about your grandmother. This is well documented. I'm just curious. You mentioned, her passing a little while ago. How much there is that you didn't get to. I mean, and I know all about how important she was and introducing you to music and keeping you on track, and your drug experiences with when you were with her and everything. How much is there that you would hope to share now since she's passed away?
Oh man,
that you would hope for her to see?
No, I would hope that she would see just what a great place I'm at in my life, especially with my family now. She saw me towards the end in my previous relationship, just how bad it was. Luckily, before she passed away, she was able to meet my current wife. She got to see all the kids. We were able to kind of have them there. She was dealing with dementia, which tough, you know. I was able to make sure that she had hospice at her home. So she didn't have to, you know, so she wasn't in a hospital or anything. She had 24-hour care. She was taken care of. But she still didn't, you know, there were a lot of times where she didn't realize she was home. She thought she was in other places, you know. She thought I was somebody else. Like she didn't, you know, it's times like that where it's hard for you as, you know, somebody who, you know, was raised by that person essentially, to understand that it's not about you, it's about the situation that they're in, you know. But she was able to, you know, in a couple of her lucid moments, she met Alicia. They got along great. She got to see Peanut, my daughter. She got to see Griff. We were able to kind of be there for her all at once. And she got to experience the fact that this was, you know, I was in a really, really good place, you know. I just wish that she could see just how much better it is now than it was even then, you know. That to me, that would be the only thing that I would wish for, because she knew that I worked hard. She knew that I shared it with her. She knew that I always gave credit to her for my work ethic, my tenacity, just making sure that she knew that I at least tried to hold to the things that she taught me, you know. So there wasn't a lot left on the table for her to know, you know. So really that would just be it, is that I'm okay, the family's okay, and we're heading in a really great direction.
That's a great place to end it. I mean, you basically give her credit for you still being alive, if I understood right. The old interviews that I'd seen, you know, this new album, it occurred to me while you were talking, is kind of like I could picture down the road like a Jake LaMotta moment at the beginning of Raging Bull, right? Like where it's like this person who's known for this one
right
sort of form of being able to turn on this switch of like internal violence or something,
right?
And being able, you know, if you're familiar with the opening sequence of that film, being able to reflect on it in a way that is really, you can see how far this person has come,
right?
You know, and I don't know if in the movie it's supposed to be that he's a cliche because he's in Vegas. I don't know if that's sort of the point. I don't think so. I always got it as like, oh, where this guy's come from, he's now relatable. Or even where Mike Tyson is at now, you know,
right?
We're so relatable. It's like, holy shit, this guy was so aware and so sensitive all along and so observant of people. It's kind of what it feels like you're embarking on with this record. That's what hit me. That's how I see it. So, you know, Godspeed.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for going extra.
Oh, it's all good, man. No, it's listen, it's not often that a great conversation gets to carry itself to a natural conclusion. So I appreciate you coming in with something that's not the standard fucking J11 bullshit, man. Like, because it's, listen, I do that all the time and it's fine and it's part of the thing. But when you really get a great conversation like this, I appreciate that more than you know. So thank you for that.
And that means the world to me. So cool, man.
All right, man.
And yeah, all right. Take care.
All right, man. Take it easy, buddy.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, welcome to Feedback Death. I'm Sammy Arcade, the Apostle.